It's time for the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast, a podcast so good it doesn't need a name. So without any further ado, here's your host, JD. Take it away, Johnny.
Hello my friends and welcome to episode 61 of the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast, recorded on December 14th, 2014. I'm your host JD aka Gaddick Teague, and today's episode is the continuing chronicles of Shadows of Revan. I played through Shadows of Revan on my Imperial character this week, and I guess I wasn't really surprised, but I was hoping that it would be a little bit more different than the Republic storyline, but it's really pretty much the same thing. Well, what else can you expect, really? I guess that's what we're gonna get for the rest of the game. I spoke last week about the story quest, and I have the same feeling about this story quest. It would have been better done broken up into more parts, but that's that. I also was able to complete all of the hard mode flashpoints so far, the four Forged Alliances storyline flashpoints in hard mode, through Random Group Finder. I also did 2 of the bonus bosses, so we'll be talking about those. We'll be talking about how I think the flashpoints are constructed, how I think they could be improved, and then we'll talk a little bit about stats. They came out this week, and talked a little bit about accuracy, and I have some opinions about accuracy and the other stats that I will be giving. So, with all that being said, let's force leap right in.
Red 2, I've got a topic coming in hot requesting clearance to engage.
Lock S-foils and attack positions, you are cleared to discuss.
So during the week, I was trying to do all of the hard mode flashpoints before this podcast, and was finding that queue times are unreasonably long. They haven't improved at all from just days before the patch drops, the expansion dropped. I was in queue time for hours, it seemed, and I think it was actually hours. I think I sat in a queue for over 2 hours. Maybe it was broken. They still have problems with their matchmaking system, which is a issue. I think they need to figure that out somehow. But if it wasn't, then that's kind of scary. The fact that with all the new people, maybe they're all leveling up and still stuck leveling, and I've powered up to 60 quickly and are trying to do hard mode flashpoints too soon. But it would seem to me that after 2 weeks, or 1 week, if you didn't get early access, if the expansion was as popular as it would seem, you would have much faster queue times, even for DPS, for the hard mode flashpoints. Maybe people are solely sticking to the tacticals, but it's not like the hard modes have a reputation of being rock hard or something that you can't do in a pug group. And that's my main point here, is the fact that the hard modes are very easy, and they can very easily be done in the group finder without any issue, without any real gear grinds or anything like that required. You hit level 60 with all the quest gear that you got, and you can hop right in and have no issues. The only flashpoint you may have some issues with is the best flashpoint, in my opinion, which was Manon. But let's take this from what I feel was the worst flashpoint to what I feel was the best flashpoint. Last week I talked about Legacy of the Rakata, and I guess this makes me happy to say, but to be honest, the other ones aren't that much better. The Legacy of the Rakata flashpoint was my least favorite of the 4 hard mode flashpoints thus far. Next up would probably be Tython. The assault on Tython I thought was very lackluster. I'm happy to hear that they took my advice. I was saying it during the story mode PTS when they put the 2 flashpoints on the PTS way back when, and I covered that. I said, why does the second boss not have upgrading droids? It's obviously a carbon copy of the quest giver that gives you the quests to fight the progressively upgraded droids, so why doesn't this boss have progressively upgraded droids? Well, much to my surprise, they finally implemented that, and the boss on hard mode does have progressively upgraded droids. But other than that, he is not difficult at all. Each progressive set of upgraded droids just has one different ability, and none of them do that much damage. It's nothing that, oh, if you don't get out of this, you die. So I found that second boss, even though it was upgraded visually and definitely made more interesting and a little bit more fun to say, hey, look at that, they did finally copy that quest giver. I don't think it was a super well done hard mode boss. The first boss, though, was, I think, a great upgrade. Again, I felt like it was missing one mechanic, maybe, that would have made it a real stellar hard mode boss encounter. I like the fact that this boss makes you do something that is very common to raids, which is getting together and moving as a group or moving separately, individually, and being individually responsible for yourself and being able to be aware of what's around you. In a hard mode flashpoint, if hard mode flashpoints really are the stepping stone that they should be, then each boss should have something that trains you to do something that is very commonly required in raids. I very much like the orbital strike mechanic that requires you to either group up and drop all 4 reticles together, or split up in a way that you're not stepping where the other player was. That's something that raiders still have problems with. Very good raiders that I know still have problems with the don't step where someone else has been mechanic. It's very common for that to happen in raid bosses, and I'm glad to see them implementing it here in a boss. Now, the only problem I have with it is that that's the only interesting part of the fight. The rest of it is just kill a couple ads when they spawn, and to stay out of any of the other stupid stuff. And it's great that if you do fail that to drop your AoEs, you will start dying. They do about 75% of your health in one shot. So if you screw up twice, you're dead. I like that a lot. I think they're doing a good job with that. I think it's a good idea to give everyone one redo. It's not a raid. It doesn't have to be a one-shot kill. But after that one redo, and you have to turn it around quick. If you screw up one, then it's a good chance you're going to screw up the other because you're probably not moving in the right direction or moving quickly enough. And then after you screw up that one, you're out, you're dead, you're done. But that also kind of exposes some of the other mechanics in the fact that, other than that, there's very little that can actually kill you. And that's a problem with a lot of mechanics in a lot of games, is that they put mechanics in there that have no chance of killing you. And if something has absolutely zero chance of killing you, then that mechanic actually does nothing to make the fight more interesting. It's just a visual flair. It doesn't build up the boss any further. Say you have a mechanic that targets one person in the flashpoint group and deals 99% of damage to them, but there's no other mechanic in the fight. Well, that mechanic is useless. Even though it does 99% of a player's health, there's nothing else that can kill them. So that mechanic doesn't force the group to do anything differently. They just heal that player up, and then that's the fight. Unless there's an actual chance of a player dying due to the interaction of multiple mechanics, then individual mechanics don't really matter. You have to design the fight so that the combination of the mechanics work to kill a player. It's very devious. It's the DM mentality. How can I kill this group of players when I do this when I'm playing D&D? How can I kill this group of players, but make it fair and in a way where they could have done something about it, they know they could have done something about it, but they just couldn't handle doing something about it, or the dice rolls just didn't meet up with what they needed. I think that's what the game designers and what the devs at BioWare need to do, is to coordinate those mechanics and make them so it's not one mechanic that kills you, it's the interaction between multiple mechanics. And I think that's something they do incredibly well in the final boss fight of Manon, which I'll talk about at the end of this segment. But they don't do that enough in their flashpoints. They do it pretty well in their operations. They do a great job. Well, I wouldn't say a great job. They are very competent at doing their operations. They've done some of the most fun operations fights I've ever done in an MMO. But I would like to see that trickle down a little bit more into their hard mode flashpoints. And then the final boss fight is pretty much the same as story mode. I think there's an added knockdown mechanic where he has an AoE cone in front of him that knocks the players down, so you don't want to be standing in front of him. It's basically a cleave mechanic. Don't be in front of the dragon, or you'll get cleaved, or breath attacked, or whatever. Similar mechanics. It's fine. It's fun. I like it. It looks cool. But again, it doesn't have that interaction of mechanics that will kill you, unless you stand in stupid. But I really wouldn't have a problem with one or two of bosses like the last boss of the Assault on Tython Flashpoint. It's a fun fight, it's an interesting fight, it visually looks cool with all the stuff falling from the ceiling. You can die if you're incredibly stupid and just stand in the purple the entire time. But again, I think they could have added another mechanic in there to really punish players who stand in the stupid. And my second favorite hard mode flashpoint was the Assault on Korriban. I thought the first boss was interesting. If you stood and stuff, you would probably die. It's really punishing for melee, not so much for ranged. I think that could have been changed up a little bit somehow. I don't know exactly how they would do that. But the game continues to punish melee as much as it can in the first boss fight. Then the second boss fight, which on Korriban, the second boss fight is... Oh, I'm sorry, I'm mixing up the boss fights. That was the second boss fight is with the droid that has like the lightning around him. The first boss fight is the dog guy. I like that they've lengthened the fight so that he can release the 3 cages of dogs. But other than that, he really doesn't do anything. Definitely needs a tune-up, definitely needs some more mechanics in there, nothing super interesting going on. And then the last fight of the Korriban Flashpoint is pretty much the same as the story mode version, again, like Tython, except for the droids that are a little different. There are 2 different types of droids. The malfunctioning ones will walk up to you and then explode with a red AoE circle. And then the other kinds of droids, the non-malfunctioning ones, will walk up to someone and stun them. I think that's a cool mechanic. It doesn't play well with the other mechanics. There's no other mechanics that really tie off that or make that a worrisome thing. You just pay attention to what the droids are doing, and it's not really a big deal. And there's not much other damage going out, except for when he AoE stuns and does a lot of damage to the group. The mechanics, they don't play well together. I really like the 2 different kinds of droids. I think if there were more frequent droids being spawned, I think that would have made the fight a little bit more interesting. They come out pretty slowly, but if it's like every time the droids spawn, it's 2 of the explodey ones and 1 of the stunny ones, and they target 3 different players, I think that would be a lot more, and groups would have to focus a lot more and play a lot better together to complete that boss fight. But overall, maybe Korriban is my 3rd favorite. And Tython, now that I'm explaining it, I thought going in that Tython was my 3rd favorite and Korriban would be my 2nd favorite. But I think having spoken about it, I think I would like to switch those and make Korriban my 3rd favorite, Tython my 2nd favorite. And then my favorite by far is Manon. Manon, I think, just like its story mode version was the best of the bunch, the hard mode version, by far and away the best of the bunch. The first boss is pretty weak, I have to say. That one is a not great boss. It's just long and annoying and not much can kill you and not much going on either. They just switch the shields and that's really it. I don't even know where to go from that, but the 2nd and 3rd boss are just so good. And the bonus boss, I'll talk about bonus bosses in the 2nd segment, but the 2nd and 3rd boss are absolutely great in my opinion. The 2nd boss is very similar to the 1st boss, except for the fact that he puts the project bubbles, the puddles in the ground, on everyone, so it really forces you to stack up and make everyone deal with the flow mechanic that electrifies the water when the boss decides to. There are ads that spawn that can kill you. This is a boss that can kill you. Anytime a boss can kill you, and anytime I wipe on a boss 1 or 2 times in a hard mode flashpoint because of my own stupidity or someone else's stupidity, I don't think every hard mode boss should be bang your head against the wall, super incredibly intense, impossible to beat unless you're in vent and coordinating things like an operation would, like a hard mode operation would. But I do think that a couple wipes in a flashpoint isn't going to hurt anybody. Yes, it might. Yes, some people might whine and complain, oh, I want to get my flashpoint done, my daily flashpoint done, Well, too bad. I think that players have the unreasonable expectation that you should never wipe in a flashpoint. That's a very poor philosophy that was indoctrinated in the MMO community, I think by WoW, maybe some other games also did it. But I really think that the WoW during Wrath of the Lich King heroics and how they've gone forward has really, it's really told players, hey, if you wipe in a flashpoint, you're doing it wrong. You shouldn't wipe in a flashpoint. I don't think that's how it should be. I think if you're wiping consistently over and over again in a flashpoint, that's a bad thing. But 1 or 2 wipes in here so that you have to learn the mechanics, you have to teach each other and actually talk and coordinate, there's nothing wrong with that. It puts the M, well, the first M, right, massively, well, I guess it puts the 2nd M, partially the first, whatever. It puts one of the M's in MMO. It's the multiplayer aspect of it. You have to coordinate with your teammates, and there's nothing wrong with a couple wipes. So that's why I love the 2nd boss. And then the final boss also, in a similar way, if everyone isn't working together, and it's a great example of how the mechanics in Flashpoint work together to make something greater than the sum of its parts. You have the aggro dump, and that forces players to have to kite over into the fire. If you miss a fire, you're going to have a problem beating the enrage time or another mechanic. The ads can definitely beat up on players that are either tunnel visioning and have the boss on them and aren't paying attention to having to get the boss into the fire, or for other players, it could go on the healer, kill the healer. If the DPS aren't paying attention, if they end up on the player that also has the boss and they stand in the fire too long, it can kill them. It's a great fight that has multiple things going on and multiple things working together to make the fight the best it can be. And it's kind of difficult. If you miss a fire, you're going to have trouble beating that enrage timer. If you miss 2, you should probably just stuck because it's too late for you to do any better. I really like the last boss, and I really like Manon as a flashpoint. I think they work well together. I think it's a great example of a hard mode flashpoint done well. Not too hard, not too easy, right there in the wheelhouse, and maybe it'll get easier as people get more gear. But I think that's inevitable. I think this tier of hard mode flashpoints is once again an example of BioWare being 80% done with something. I think this tier of hard mode flashpoints is yet another example from BioWare of taking it 80% of the way there. It's a little more than half-baked, but it's not quite 100%. If they had a little bit more time, a little bit more resources, but I get the feeling it's just they don't have the resources, the time and effort to put in to get these to 100%. So they take it 80% of the way there, and then focus on getting other areas of the game to 80%. I continue to see improvement, which is good. You know, maybe it was 70% last time, and now they're getting to 75% at 80%. So that encourages me, but it constantly gives me the feeling like you guys are so close to being so good. Just get over the top already, get there. And some of the operations, I feel like they've done that, but I think other areas of the game have suffered in a way that the end tier operations have not. So I've spoken about how I feel the base flashpoints are. After the break, I'm going to talk a little bit about the hard mode, not hard mode, hard mode, the hard mode bonus bosses in each of the flashpoints, as well as accuracy, a little bit of a potluck going on in the second segment, but stick around. So if you're sitting there saying to yourself, hey, he hasn't mentioned any of the bonus bosses yet. Well, there's a few reasons for that. First, I think it's important to keep the bonus bosses separate from the main bosses. As being bonus bosses, they're not required to be completed, and a lot of groups, either groups that are planning on speedrunning or groups that just don't want to deal with the bonus bosses have very minimal loot drops right now. I think they drop 2 basic comms each and a rare drop for a decoration, and that's it. Whereas the regular bosses are the main attraction, they drop more comms, they drop more loot, they actually drop loot. So this will lead to a lot of groups planning on skipping the bonus boss, and I've had this exact same experience. So far I've done each flashpoint in hard mode once, and I've done the bonus boss in Tython, and I've done the bonus boss in Manon. And these 2 bosses could not be further from each other in terms of design, in terms of difficulty. Let's start with the boss on Tython. The boss on Tython is an absolute joke. He's the most basic form of tank and spank, and that's really all he does. He does like a push and a leap, and that's it. I think he does smash also. Like, the boss doesn't present any difficulty, he isn't dangerous, he isn't going to kill you, he's basically 2 free basic comms for a little bit of work. It takes some time to kill him, he has a lot of health. So a lot of groups will probably skip him, but of all the bonus bosses, I think that's the one that people want to do the most. On the flip side, the Manon bonus boss is a really cool boss. Basically, he's a puzzle boss that requires very unique movement from your flashpoint group, and if you're not dead on, he will absolutely wreck your team. He will kill you straight up. He has one-hit kill ability with the mines that come by. He also has a nice ability that synergizes with the mines, the stun grenade, which slows you down for 4 seconds and then stuns you for a couple seconds, which works really well as the mines are coming towards you, and you have to dip in between the mines in order to avoid them, and to have certain points at certain people. And at certain points have certain people explode the mines on purpose when you have to do it. It's a really well-designed boss, and I like that boss a lot, and I wish that was in the normal flashpoint as a regular old boss and not necessarily just a bonus boss, for a few reasons. I'm of 2 minds when it comes to the difficulty of the bonus bosses, because on one hand, yes, it's cool that you can get a really rock hard boss into a flashpoint and give the real hardcore players something to do with just 4 players if they want to try and do bonus bosses, while simultaneously not preventing the lesser geared, lesser experienced people who aren't as hardcore, who aren't as good at the game from progressing in the flashpoint. But to that I say that that's what the story modes are for. If you don't want to play a hard flashpoint, then go do the story modes. It also leads to the situation where if you're doing a random flashpoint, your group is basically never going to do the bonus bosses because they don't have the good loot. They don't have any loot at all, unlike the hard mode bonus bosses did in the old flashpoint at 55, where the bonus bosses were the ones that dropped the black market pieces. Now the end bosses drop the good pieces. So it's going to result in a lot of players just skipping right over these bonus bosses. And if it's like I said in segment 1, where flashpoints are meant to be stepping stones into operations, then there should be these difficult bosses in your regular old hard mode flashpoints. And they shouldn't be in an optional state where some players might skip out on them. It could also lead to some animosity in a flashpoint group where half the group wants to go do the bonus boss, half the group wants to just do the regular mainline bosses, people want to skip stuff. This always happens. Some people just want to go head down straight through. Some people want to take their time. Some people want to watch the cutscenes. Some people want spacebar, spacebar, spacebar. And this just adds another layer of infighting that can happen in a flashpoint group. I don't see any reason to add that in there. Just make this a required boss. I don't see a reason why BioWare would take the time out to design these bonus bosses if they don't want players to complete them. And also, I mean, you could increase their loot or give them special loot that makes everyone want to do it. Maybe they have a chance to drop a mount, a really cool mount, instead of like a decoration. I think a lot of people are over decorations already, while some people are not. But I think the vast majority of people are going to be over the decorations, but would be more than happy to try doing these bosses if they drop a cool, unique mount or a title or something like that. And then there's the other topic I want to talk about, and that would be the accuracy changes, or the lack of accuracy changes in 3.0. I mentioned this last week where accuracy seemed to be totally out of whack. Players had to basically go accuracy in every enhancement in order to hit the accuracy cap, which seems somewhat insane, especially given the fact that we know on stream BioWare said that accuracy would be giving more percentage accuracy per point when 3.0 dropped, and this seems to be completely contrary to that fact. Well, we got a gold post from Tate Watson on the 11th, and he says, "Hey everyone, I heard from the combat team, and accuracy is right where it should be. The accuracy change, more accuracy rating granting more accuracy per point, that was mentioned on the global combat livestream, and in the patch notes never ended up going out. Following internal testing, the team decided to not implement this change, as they were happy with where it was using the high-end level 60 gear. With that being said, we're happy with the DPS numbers as they are right now, and therefore have no plans currently to adjust accuracy. As always, we will continue to monitor DPS, and will make changes as needed." My opinion on accuracy goes back a long way, and I've always felt that accuracy as a stat is a silly holdover from a bygone era of MMOs. Stat that doesn't need to exist anymore, it's a straight fun tax, and it doesn't really do anything meaningful for a player. A player should really be happy to be gaining a stat, really want to be gaining a stat, feel like their stat really matters, instead of having stats that are required to be able to even play the game. If the stat is required to play the game, then that stat doesn't really have a place in the game. Just give it to everyone. Players always want to see bigger numbers, better numbers, higher numbers, bigger DPS numbers, and accuracy is just a punishment to these players. It's well, you don't get to have fun until you do this first, and then you can have fun. It's a gatekeeper. And I don't see accuracy as a meaningful or important stat. I'm talking solely on PvE right now. I'll talk about PvP in a second. But in PvE, I don't see a reason why they couldn't just take out accuracy and replace it with stats that are balanced without the accuracy. They already gave tanks 100% accuracy, so it's not like tanks need to get the accuracy. Healers, if you're worried about healers doing DPS like a regular DPS, they can already do DPS like a regular DPS, albeit at a reduced rate. Just reduce the damage that healers are doing. It should be really easy with a discipline system now. Someone takes a healing discipline, then just give them a straight reduction on their damage if you really don't want them putting out the numbers, even though they wouldn't be able to put out the numbers as a real DPS. Accuracy just taxes the player's stats, brings the player down for no reason, when It just reduces the base level at which players are expected to be at to compete. At this point, it just seems like accuracy is a crutch that they can use in order to dial back the damage, dial back the stats, and keep the damage numbers at the level that they want, instead of having to go back and change up the stats to actually make them work how they want them to work. It's a band-aid on the situation that they're just going to have to keep revamping every time. As soon as new gear comes out, the ease of access of accuracy is going to be higher, so players are going to be doing more damage, the numbers are going to be inflated, and we're going to end up with the same situation in a patch or two. Instead of fixing the real problem, which is the stats are calculated in a way in which they can't or won't control how much damage players are doing. In an ideal situation, you take out accuracy and you balance everything around the stats that players have available to them, and you wouldn't have to take any accuracy into account. Well, in PvP, I like the idea of accuracy because it's a nice analog almost to Surge, where Surge is your extra damage on your crits. Accuracy could be your extra damage on your white attacks, your basic attacks. Anything that doesn't crit, you get to do a little bit more damage because you pierce through their armor. And give them like a give and take of, well, if they have less armor, then this matters a lot less than, say, power. But if they have a lot of armor, this matters a lot more than, say, power. And I'm pretty sure that's how it works, even though I haven't gotten to the nitty-gritty of PvP accuracy in a while. So I like it in PvP, giving players the opportunity to tailor their class for, I want to make this a clothy killer, or I want to make this a tank killer class, tank killer build, a clothy killer build, something like that. But strictly in PvE, for endgame PvE, which this is mainly talking about, there isn't a real good reason for keeping accuracy in the game. Players love stats that matter, players love getting bigger numbers, bigger crits, more surge, more power, more main stat. That's what the players want. They don't want the accuracy which lets them in the door. I have always hated accuracy, and I think it would benefit the game if they dialed back the stance and either made accuracy a lot easier to get and worried about the other numbers and figured those out, or if they just removed accuracy from PvE in general. And with that, it's time for the Wall of Crazy.
What? That's impossible, even for a computer.
It's not impossible. I used to bullseye womp rats in my T16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters.
And in this week's Wall of Crazy topic, I ask you on Twitter, what is your favorite Flashpoint story mode or hard mode from the SWTOR expansion, and why? I got 2 responses here, and at DaveO_NewWaveO says, I like the Mando Flashpoint with the Biodome environments. Was different and fun. I like that one a lot. I think that's my favorite Flashpoint. Probably my favorite tactical Flashpoint that they put in the game. Blood Hunt, I believe was the name of it. That's a very cool one. Also on the Blood Hunt bandwagon is Valor at Valor2, who says, the Blood Hunt Flashpoint, except for the husband and mother fight, I have been knocked off more times than I care to admit. That's funny because today I was doing that Flashpoint, and I was thinking, they do that knockback thing. I don't think I've ever been knocked back by that. I wonder if anybody gets killed by that. Well, I guess Valor, you're one of those people. Sorry to make fun of you a little bit, but I just figured I'd rib you a bit. And that does it for this week's show. As always, if you'd like to contact me, you can send your questions, comments, concerns to gaddockteague@gaddockgaming.com, or you can tweet them to @GTeague on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes to get your weekly podcast updates. I'm also on Stitcher and some other things maybe, but mainly Stitcher and iTunes. Those are the places you can get me. If you're new to the game or thinking of resubscribing, I provided my refer a friend link in the show notes, so if you'd like a little added incentive to come back, feel free to use it. You can also check out my website, gaddockgaming.com, where I post the podcast, the blogs, and any other gaming musings that I feel like getting on the internet. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast. This is JD, signing off.